We're finally at the start of a new season, so with the regular season kicking off, who are the biggest winners and losers of the 2024 offseason? We have 5 winners and 5 losers in no particular order, so let's get into it. For our first winner, we have the Baltimore Orioles, who took a huge step forward last year, going 101-61 and winning the AL East. Now, the Orioles didn't need a whole lot going into this offseason. They had a good lineup filled with an overabundance of young hitters, one of the better bullpens in baseball last year, and a solid enough starting rotation, but the one thing they were missing was the guy to lead that rotation. And this brought them to Corbin Burnes, the 3-time All-Star and 2021 NL Cy Young winner who'd been growing frustrated with the Brewers, and Baltimore was able to swoop in and grab him without actually having to give up too much. They sent over former top prospect DL Hall, who was most likely going to be more of a long reliever spot starter this year, and infielder Joey Ortiz, who ranks in as the number 63 prospect on MLB.com's top 100. He made his debut last year, but was kind of caught up in the logjam of the Orioles' good young hitters. Baltimore gets their number 1 starter, and the main prospect they gave up was their lowest rated top 100 prospect according to MLB.com. And I know I've talked about Burnes' numbers regressing a bit over the last couple years, but he still has great stuff and solid command, so even though I'm keeping an eye out for this, I also wouldn't be surprised if he makes an adjustment back and puts up another great season. The Orioles also signed Craig Kimbrell to a $13 million deal for this year with a club option for next year, and he should help hold down the back end of the bullpen with Felix Bautista out because of Tommy John. Baltimore only really needed that big piece at the top of the rotation, and they got it without having to pay too much, and they got to fill in for their injured closer. They didn't have a whole lot of holes, but they did a really good job of filling them.
That's what she said.
But now for one of our biggest losers this offseason, it's the flip side of the Corbin Burnes saga in the Milwaukee Brewers. The Brewers are coming off an NL Central title and a 92-70 record, and yet they're trading away their best pitcher and, like I said, not really getting a whole lot back. Burnes is entering his last year of team control, but the trade was more about the fact that Burnes felt like his relationship with the team was damaged after hearing what they said about him in his arbitration case. So it was the Brewers themselves that kind of drove their best pitcher out of town. They also cleared out a lot of the older veteran guys to make way for their young players like Garrett Mitchell, Sal Frelick, Jackson Chourio, Bryce Terang, and now Ortiz and Hall to get these guys a lot of playing time, but now you're relying on a lot of guys that have barely seen any major league action to fill out your roster.
It's baby.
It's Scott.
As a baby.
He'll grow.
Now, they did bring in veterans Rhys Hoskins and Gary Sanchez to help out in the lineup, but Hoskins is coming off a torn ACL and missed all of last year, and about all you can rely on from Sanchez is a bit of pop at the plate and he'll throw out some base runners. This was an offense that was 17th in runs and 23rd in OPS last year, and they didn't do a whole lot to make it better, and they've made their pitching, which carried them last year, even worse, when they could still be competitive because there isn't a true juggernaut in their division. Speaking of which,
I'm the juggernaut, bitch!
yeah, you knew I had to put the Dodgers on here. When you spend over $1 billion and you get the best player in baseball, you hit the jackpot. LA signed Shohei Ohtani to a 10-year, $700 million contract, Yoshinobu Yamamoto to a 12-year, $325 million contract, and traded for Tyler Glasnow, then gave him a 5-year, $136.5 million extension. Ohtani's made 3 straight All-Star teams and won the MVP in 2021 and 2023, and even though he won't pitch this year coming off of Tommy John, he's the best player in baseball, and he structured his deal to help the Dodgers pay more guys around him. Yamamoto comes over at only 25 years old after dominating Japan. Scouts were raving about his stuff and giving him ace-level potential, and the Dodgers were able to win the sweepstakes to get him over a lot of the other top teams in baseball. And even though he's been great in Peaky Blinders and Oppenheimer, Glasnow's been a bit of a glass cannon. He's been absolutely electric when he's been able to pitch, but throughout his 9-year career, he's only gone over 100 innings twice. LA also signed veterans like Teoscar Hernandez and James Paxton to 1-year deals, because with Ohtani's contract structured the way it is, they're pushing all their chips in. And even though Ohtani's coming off a second Tommy John, Yamamoto's making the transition from Japan, and most of their starting pitchers are either already on the IL or you can bet on them getting hurt, they're gonna roll those dice and spend whatever they have to in case a couple of them crap out. And once again, on the losing side of this, we have the LA Angels. Because you can't lose the best player in baseball and not be a loser.
Le who? The her.
The Angels all but wasted the first 5 years of Ohtani and Mike Trout being together, then in 2023 threw up a Hail Mary at the deadline to go all in and try to convince Ohtani to stay, and it didn't work. So they missed the playoffs again. Mike Trout's another year on the wrong side of 30. The best player in baseball walks out the door along with the prospects that you traded away in your last-ditch effort to keep him, and what do the Angels do? They sign Robert Stevenson, a reliever that's had a combined ERA and FIP over 4 since 2019, and if you think I'm cherry picking with that, I'm being generous. They sign him to a 3-year, $33 million deal, and the only position player, not the best, the only one that they signed was Aaron Hicks. You can't make this shit up.
You can't keep getting away with it! He can't keep getting away with it!
I have no words for this. You still have Mike Trout, and I know his injury history at this point, and he's not the player that he used to be, but he was still on track for about 6 F-WAR last year. That's a pretty damn good player. Would you please help him out just once? You're in a division with the Rangers coming off a championship. The Astros are still one of the top teams in the league, and you also have the Mariners, who, spoiler alert, we're gonna talk about in just a second. You had to do something to add around Mike Trout if you don't want to fall even further behind in this division, or just give in and kick off the rebuild. But the Angels are just staying put right in the middle, and then if you want to throw in Anthony Rendon somehow acting like even more of a jackass, I'm so sorry, Angels fans.
No, you're not.
Yeah, you're probably right. But that's because I'm a Mariners fan and being completely unbiased by that because, you know, I'm a professional. Seattle's also one of the big winners this offseason. The Mariners front office went into this offseason with an idea of how much extra payroll they had to spend, then ownership completely pulled the rug out from underneath them. So at the last second, they had to change course and figure out how they could still fix their big issues with no money to spend. Seattle's offense wasn't bad last year by runs, OPS, or WRC+, but they had way too many swings and misses and stranded a lot of runners because they'd strike out so much and they couldn't even get productive outs when they needed to. The first part of the plan was shedding payroll, so Seattle traded away Eugenio Suarez to the Diamondbacks after a down year, former top prospect Jared Kelenic and salary dumps in Evan White and Marco Gonzalez to the Braves, and former Cy Young winner Robbie Ray to the Giants while he's recovering from Tommy John. Now they had money to overhaul the lineup, so they signed Mitch Garver to a 2-year, $24 million deal with a mutual option for 2026, and traded for Luis Urias from the Red Sox, Luke Raley from the Rays, brought back Mitch Haniger in the trade with the Giants, and Jorge Polanco from the Twins. Now obviously, none of these guys are superstar hitters, and each have their own flaws and concerns, but for better or worse, Seattle either swapped out or let guys walk that they thought were causing their biggest issues offensively, and they did it without giving up their biggest assets. The Mariners have arguably the best collection of young, team-controllable pitchers in George Kirby, Logan Gilbert, Bryce Miller, and Brian Wu that every other team would love to get their hands on, and they didn't have to trade a single one of those guys. They only gave up a couple relievers, but then they just turned around and traded with the White Sox for Gregory Santos and signed Ryan Stanek, so problem solved. I don't know how GM Jerry DiPoto managed to pull all this off without trading a single young starting pitcher or having any money, and we're gonna see how well this actually ends up working out, but damn, was that some maneuvering on DiPoto's part. So now for another offseason loser, we have the Toronto Blue Jays. And no, it's not because of the Ohtani private jet thing, you psychos. Well, missing out on Ohtani definitely sucks, especially by most accounts being the runner-up, but Toronto needed to do something to take another step forward, and after they missed out on Ohtani, it kinda seemed like they, gave up.
He'll see this fight to the end without any of our help, even if it kills him. I give up.
I'll kill him!
Their big signing was Yariel Rodriguez on a 5-year, $32 million deal. And I say this with any of these guys coming from Japan or any foreign league, we still don't know what he is as a major league pitcher until we see him against major league hitters. Then their only other free agents they gave major league contracts to were a 39-year-old Justin Turner and Isaiah Kiner-Falefa. And other than taking flyers on Daniel Vogelbach, Eduardo Escobar, and Joey Votto, that was basically their offseason. That's just not good enough for where this team's at. They finished 89-73 last year after winning over 90 games the 2 years before, and they were bounced in the wildcard round for the second year in a row and the third time in the last 4 years. The Blue Jays have basically been stuck in neutral since 2020. They've been good enough to be a fringe playoff team, but not good enough to win the division or really compete with the top teams, and they need to do something quick because time's running out. Bo Bichette and Vladdy Jr. are both set to hit free agency after next season, so Toronto needs to make a decision on what they're going to do with their 2 young core pieces. And George Springer, Kevin Gausman, and Chris Bassett, their 3 highest paid players, they're only getting farther on the wrong side of 30. Now's the time to go all in. Go sign free agents and pull off trades to get quality guys to add to your core. But just sitting by without making any significant moves to make your team better before you run out of time, well, that just makes you
AL7 Weenie.
Now to get back to the big moves of the offseason, and the first major domino that fell was Juan Soto to the New York Yankees. We knew Soto was gonna get traded, and we knew the Yankees were trying to get him, and they kicked off the offseason by finally getting another superstar hitter to pair with Aaron Judge. The 3-time All-Star and 4-time Silver Slugger is an on-base machine, and he absolutely makes the Yankees lineup better. The risk, obviously, is that Soto's a free agent after this year, but if you're the Yankees, you take that risk and get the head start on trying to convince him to stay. He'll improve a lineup that was 24th in OPS and 25th in runs last year, but the Yankees didn't stop there. They also brought in Alex Verdugo in a trade with the Red Sox, and God, that's weird to say. A contact-first bat that's pretty tough to strike out, and with the both of these guys, they've completely reshaped their outfield, even though I'm not a huge fan of having Aaron Judge as the everyday center fielder, especially when he's already struggled with injuries throughout his career in a less demanding position. New York also wanted to add some starting pitching after their rotation had their own share of struggles last year, so they signed Marcus Stroman to a 2-year, $37 million deal with a vesting option for 2026. He's a quality number 2 or 3 starter that's gonna keep the ball in the ballpark and keep the walks down, but he has missed a couple of starts the last 2 years. New York added a powerhouse bat, another solid bat and starting pitcher, and a solid reliever in Caleb Ferguson that they got in a trade with the Dodgers. That's definitely a step in the right direction for getting them back to being the big bad Yankees.
I have brought peace, freedom, justice, and security to my new empire.
Your new empire?
And once again, on the other side of this, we have the Padres, and not just because they traded Juan Soto. Obviously, trading Soto was a big loss, and it's even worse when the only reason that they needed to trade him was because they had to cut payroll after signing Xander Bogaerts, their 17th shortstop last offseason. But the Padres needed to shed payroll, and they needed starting pitching with Blake Snell, Michael Wacha, Seth Lugo, and Nick Martinez, who all combined for over 500 innings as starters for him last year, all hitting free agency. And they did pull this off with the Soto trade. They got Michael King, who's been very good as a reliever, spot starter, along with Johnny Brito and Randy Vasquez, who both made their debuts last year. And finally, there was Drew Thorpe. Thorpe is the number 85 prospect in baseball according to MLB.com and made it to AA last year. He probably won't be ready till the end of this year at the earliest, but he'd be another cheap, team-controllable pitcher for San Diego. You know, if they didn't already trade him. Still trying to be competitive, the Padres sent a package of prospects with Thorpe as the centerpiece to the White Sox for Dylan Cease, the Cy Young runner-up in 2022. And you know, I don't necessarily have a problem with them trading Thorpe right away, but Cease is coming off his worst season since his rookie year in 2019, and he's another one of these guys that's inconsistent because he has no control.
Careful, you idiot! I said across her nose, not up it!
Sorry, sir. Doing my best.
I've talked plenty at this point about guys like him and Snell that have great stuff, but no idea where it's going. They're great when everything goes their way and they can basically be unhittable, but since they walk so many guys, all it takes is a couple big hits at the wrong times, and those walks come back to absolutely kill them. So the Padres trade one of the best young hitters in baseball, and they do get a couple starting pitchers back that they desperately need, but then they trade their top 100 prospect they also got in that deal for a guy with major control issues, and their big signing was reliever Yuki Matsui on a 5-year, $28 million deal, who could be good, but again, we just don't know yet with these guys coming over from Japan. So you trade away Soto because of your own mistakes, you lose Josh Hader, one of the better closers in baseball, and I may not like him personally as a pitcher, but Blake Snell did just win the Cy Young for you. That's a lot that's walking out the door and getting replaced by a lot of question marks. But in the same division, you have a team that had a lot walk in the door. Wait, different team.
Another one.
The San Francisco Giants made a lot of moves this offseason trying to keep up with the Dodgers, first revamping their lineup by signing Korean star Jung-Hoo Lee to a 6-year, $113 million deal, then signing slugger Jorge Soler to a 3-year, $42 million deal, and they got Matt Chapman on a 3-year, $54 million deal with opt-outs after each year after he didn't get the long-term offer that he was looking for. Lee'll probably slot in as the leadoff hitter and set the table for the likes of Soler and Chapman, and getting these guys should help an offense that was 26th in OPS and 24th in runs last year. They also added to the rotation by signing Jordan Hicks to a 4-year, $44 million deal with the hopes of converting him back to a starter. They again capitalized to get the NL Cy Young winner Blake Snell on just a 2-year, $62 million deal with an opt-out after this year, and like I mentioned earlier, they got the 2021 AL Cy Young winner and Robbie Ray in a trade with the Mariners, even though he won't be back from Tommy John until most likely the second half of the season. The Giants have been trying for years to make a splash move, and now by the end of this year, you could have a top of the rotation with Logan Webb, Blake Snell, and Robbie Ray. That's not a bad 1 through 3 if you're going into a playoff series, and at least a third of their lineup that really struggled last year looks completely different. The Giants went big this offseason and revamped their roster, and the big part of this again is that they got both Chapman and Snell without even having to commit $100 million to either of them. San Francisco played this pretty damn well.
I'll make that deal. How about you bitch? You make that deal?
I'd make that deal.
I don't blame you. Damn good deal.
And speaking of those deals, for our final loser of the offseason, there's one guy that took a huge hit because of those and more, and that's Scott Boras. Boras is the baseball super agent that's negotiated major free agent deals for Steven Strasburg, Garrett Cole, Corey Seager, and Bryce Harper, just to name a few. And this offseason, he was seeking $200 million contracts for both Blake Snell and Cody Bellinger.
$100 billion.
Now, I did a whole video on these two that you can check out next, but Boras usually has his clients waited out as long as they need to until someone gives in and offers the mega deal that he's looking for. And with both of these guys coming off good years, that's exactly what they did. But both Snell and Bellinger, and if you want, you can throw Chapman in this too, they all have underlying holes in their games that had teams hesitant to give them big contracts. So these guys kept waiting and waiting, but the offers they were looking for never came. Boras' tactics aren't working anymore. Teams are getting too smart, and they have all the information they need to find out exactly what kind of players these guys are and what they're worth. Hell, I can find those numbers, and I'm just screaming in an empty room. And we can just go ahead and put that on the list of why I need therapy.
All right, I'll do the math, but I'm not gonna meet with any fucking therapist.
Teams are sticking to what they actually value these players at, and they're not getting desperate enough to cave to Scott Boras. So that's why you have Snell on basically a prove-it deal with the Giants after winning his second Cy Young this year. Same with Chapman, who hasn't put up an 800 OPS in a full season since 2019, and Bellinger got a similar 3-year, $80 million deal with opt-outs each year to go back to the Cubs, coming off a kind of bounce back year on a prove-it deal last season. Finally, let's give out some honorable mentions for both a pretty good and a kinda disappointing offseason. First, the Kansas City Royals I thought did the best job of helping out their rebuild by adding veterans to help out their young players, more than the Tigers, Pirates, or Reds, who had very similar off seasons. They brought in Hunter Renfroe and Adam Frazier to fill out a couple lineup spots. They extended Bobby Witt Jr. for 11 years and nearly $289 million, but most importantly, they added to a rotation that was 27th in ERA by signing Seth Lugo and Michael Wacha, and completely turned over a bullpen that was 29th in ERA with guys like Nick Anderson, Chris Stratton, and Will Smith, which basically means they're winning the World Series, so go ahead and lock that in. They didn't make any earth-shattering moves by any means. More than anything, they just raised the floor of this team, so that's why I couldn't put them above the other teams that I mentioned earlier. And then the Minnesota Twins, fresh off a division title, just like the Brewers, took a step back this offseason. They had players like Sonny Gray, who finished second in the AL Cy Young race last year, Kenta Maeda and Jorge Polanco all leave this offseason, and they didn't really do much to replace what they lost. In fact, the Twins' payroll is currently sitting at about $31 million less than last year, according to Fangraphs, and they currently have Edward Julian, Royce Lewis, Matt Wallner, and Louis Varland, and some of these guys played really well, but they've all got less than 2 years of service time, so there's still kind of question marks. These guys are all set to get steady playing time in the lineup or the rotation based off of Fangraphs projections right now. And like, I get it, the AL Central was the worst division in baseball last year, and I don't think anybody would be surprised if that happened again this year. But how about after you win your division and make the playoffs, you don't gut your payroll, rely on a couple question marks, and actively take a step back? But what do I know? So let me know all your thoughts about the offseason. If you enjoyed the video, please hit like and subscribe. And for more baseball content like this, you can check out the video on your screen next. Thanks for watching and supporting the channel. Have a good one. Later.